Module 6. Today we are talking about kicking out perfection, knowing how to accept. The key characteristic for this week and this module is presence and focus, understanding that you are doing the best that you can. And how does perfection show up in our team life? How does perfection show up in the office? Well, obviously, you've gone into this profession as professionals to solve the problem of the nuances, the millimeters, the smile, and we work in millimeters. And so perfection is part of our daily routine. But what happens when you are able to let go? So the key takeaways for this week is really the pressures that we put on ourselves. So being able to break up with expectations of others, expectations of yourself, the pressure that you put on yourselves, and how that shows up in your practice life, how that shows up in your personal life, and what are some habits that you're willing to let go of, and what are some new habits that you can create as a result of this newfound acceptance. And practicing presence and focus with everything that you do, but realizing that it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, I understand you're probably thinking, well, we work in millimeters. I understand that, but we're talking about you governing your life and you governing your practice life and the way that you want to lead. You see, as an extraordinary leader of your own life and how that spills over onto the lives that you touch, whether it's from the professional standpoint or in the community, being able to be gentle with yourself is huge. And so many of us as healthcare professionals put extraordinary amounts of pressure. And what we're going to navigate through now is, well, where does this idea of perfection come in from? And can you think of instances in your own life right now, going through this video, of where perfection arises the most, where you're the most displeased, and how we can bring awareness and acceptance to that? Because when we're more accepting of some of the flaws, some of the mistakes that we make, and being able to kick out perfection. Tal Ben-Shahar has a beautiful book around perfection and teaches this course at Harvard around happiness and the frustration that accompanies deep perfection. Tony Robbins talks about perfection as being deathly afraid of failure. Deathly afraid of failure. So what does perfection look like in your own life? What does it prevent you from doing? Does it prevent you from launching something within your own life? Does it prevent you from actually taking the leap of whatever you need to do? Does it cause procrastination because it's not perfect enough? I would notice a lot of times when we would do an email campaign for patients, or even just with the new designs for the office, it was never good enough. It was never ever good enough. Or, with patients that come in, we would go back and forth to get the color right. And of course, we could talk about mismanaged expectations on the one hand, but on the other, we're so trained, vigorously trained to get it completely perfect. But what does perfection even mean? And so in the ability to allow yourself to make mistakes and obviously learn from them, but at the core of it, it's really being able to accept exactly where you are. We only have 24 hours in the day, so how are you going to choose those 24 hours? Are you going to choose to be frustrated in your world because things are not exactly the way that you would want them to be? How can you accept the current state of your mind, the current state of governing how your practice is looking like, how your team members are being trained so that they can spread the message, so that you don't have to do all of the work? This is what I want for you to take away with. This is what I want, the value that you should be implementing in your own life, is how you can, with what we learned last week, with empathy and compassion, learn to accept and basically kick out this perfection. Secondly, what I want to talk about is how to break up with these expectations. There's so many expectations of others, and expectations and perfections go hand in hand. And I remember just even in my own practice life, when I used to govern by the expectations of others, what this picture perfect practice would look like. And when it would veer into something else, it would cause so much damaging just thoughts within my own head. Thoughts that we weren't moving fast enough, or I wasn't gaining the right amount of patience fast enough. When I started to do Botox and Juvederm in my practice, I even did a Groupon, and for a very long time, it was mismanaged expectations. Well, when you realize that was not the best decision that I could have made, because what it did was it undervalued the services. Now, one can argue on one point, well, this was great practice and you're building and you're marketing and all of these things, but what it did was it gave this entire element of these patients who weren't really the ones that I would typically attract, and they were the ones that wanted a deal, and they were never going to be happy because they were looking for a deal. And now, in your own practices, you've all been privy to these types of decisions. Sometimes we make good ones, and sometimes we make not so good ones, but we can learn from this. And what I learned is that, okay, on the one hand, you're building this practice of fueling this new skill that you're building. But then on the other hand, it's attracting all of these patients who aren't happy within themselves. They're trying to come to you to fix something. And then you, because you're leading with this lens of this expectation of whatever they are bringing to the table, and obviously this perfection, it's a deathly combination, because no one's going to be happy. You're going to be frustrated, and they're obviously going to be frustrated. And then what does it result in? Bad reviews, and of course the spiral down of effects. And once I got rid of that, it was definitely a different way, because you're more authentic with your approach. You're able to protect your boundaries as a healthcare professional and what you want to allow into your practice. And for the sake of extra dollar signs, in the long run, it's going to save you so much more time, energy, effort, as well as being able to efficiently train your team so that they can handle some of these hurdles. You already have so many things going on. Being able to micromanage on some of these small details, you have to realize, how does it actually affect you in the way that you're leading your life, in the way that you're leading your practice life in the long run? So, in other words, what are you willing to quiet the sideline noise on? What are you willing to have and create these new ideals and new habits for yourself, so that you are letting go of these expectations that others place on you, these expectations that maybe your colleagues expect from you or your team members expect from you. And really what it boils down to is having this effective communication. So in your 4x4 meetings, what I would encourage you to do is, what new habits for the office you collectively as a team would be willing to focus on. Focus and presence are key words, because do you want to add another skill set to your practice? What are you willing to do in order to fully build that out? And what are you willing to accept along the way? Acceptance is a big thing. Acceptance and being present and focused are huge.